Hello, listeners. Welcome back to the Audio Listener Podcast, your daily space for English listening practice. Today's episode is about phrasal verbs. Phrasal verbs are very common in English. Native speakers use them every day in conversations, podcasts, and daily life. In this episode, I will explain some difficult phrasal verbs and repeat them many times with different examples, so you can slowly understand and remember them. Let's begin. Let's start with the phrasal verb come to terms with. Come to terms with means to accept something emotionally, especially when it is difficult or unexpected. For example, I'm still trying to come to terms with the change. She needed time to come to terms with the decision. He hasn't come to terms with what happened yet. Notice something important here. When someone says come to terms with, they are not confused about facts. They understand the situation, but emotionally, they are still processing it. You might hear, I know it's over, but I'm still coming to terms with it. At first, I couldn't come to terms with the idea. It took me months to finally come to terms with the truth. So again, come to terms with is about emotional acceptance over time. You don't come to terms with something instantly. You slowly come to terms with it. Phase out. Now let's talk about phase out. Phase out means to remove something slowly, step by step. For example, the company is phasing out old technology. I'm trying to phase out bad habits. They plan to phase out this system next year. Notice that phase out never means suddenly. You don't phase something out in one day. You phase it out over time. More examples. She's phasing out sugar from her diet. The school is phasing out paper exams. I want to phase out unhealthy routines. So remember, phase out means slow removal. Wind down. Let's move to wind down. Wind down means to relax slowly, especially after stress or work. For example, after work, I need time to wind down. I usually listen to music to wind down. It's hard for me to wind down at night. You don't wind down instantly. You slowly wind down. More examples. This podcast helps me wind down. I try to wind down before sleeping. Give yourself time to wind down. So again, wind down is about gradual calm, not sudden rest. Brush off. Now let's look at brush off. Brush off means to ignore or dismiss something, often lightly. For example, he brushed off the comment. She brushed off the criticism. I tried to brush it off. Sometimes people brush things off because they don't care. Sometimes they brush things off because they care too much and want to protect themselves. More examples. He laughed and brushed it off. She told me to brush it off. I shouldn't have brushed it off. So, brush off is about choosing not to engage. Down to. Now, let's focus on boil down to. Boil down to means to explain the real simple reason behind something. For example, it all boils down to practice. The problem boils down to time. Learning English boils down to consistency. You often hear this phrasal verb in advice. More examples. Success boils down to habits. It boils down to how much effort you give. At the end of the day, it boils down to choice. So remember, boil down to equals the main truth. Wear off. Next is wear off. Wear off means something slowly disappears. For example, the excitement wore off. The pain will wear off. The motivation wears off after a while. You don't control when something wears off. It happens naturally. More examples. The effect will wear off soon. After a few days, the stress wore off. The fear eventually wore off. So wear off is about natural fading. Settle for. Now let's talk about settle for. Settle for means accepting less than what you wanted, often realistically. For example, I wanted more, but I settled for this. She settled for a smaller apartment. He didn't love the job, but he settled for it. This phrasal verb carries emotion. More examples. Don't settle for less than you deserve. I didn't want to settle for comfort. Sometimes you settle for stability. So settle for is about compromise. You've heard each phrasal verb again and again. Come to terms with, phase out, wind down, brush off, boil down to, wear off, settle for. This repetition is not accidental. That's how your brain learns language, through familiarity, not memorization. You don't need to force these phrasal verbs into your speech. First, let them enter your ears, then your understanding, and finally, your natural speaking. Fluency grows quietly. Thank you for listening to the Audio Listener Podcast.